Hello, everyone, and welcome to First Tuesday Talks. My name is Trudy Peterson. I'm your host for this morning. First Tuesday Talks are held every other month. They are organized by the Section on Archives and Human Rights of the International Council on Archives. Before we begin today's talk with our speaker, let me remind you of a couple of basics about Zoom meetings. We ask you to keep yourself muted during the presentation. And we also ask that if you have a question or comment, a civil one, that you wish to give to the speaker, and he is speaking and you're afraid you will forget it, then please use the chat function. We'll watch the chat and see what's in there. And at the conclusion of the presentation, we'll try to get back to indeed the issues that are raised in the chat. Now, our speaker today is Dr. Peter Horsman. Peter has a long history of teaching archives at the University of Amsterdam, at the Archives School of the Netherlands. He has worked in the Netherlands archives and also in Municipal Archives in Dordrecht. He's lectured extensively all over the world. He has written a lot. He was the editor of the journal Archival Science for a period of time. Currently, he's active as a consultant, mostly in the field of electronic records and archives management and digital preservation. He's been active for years in the International Council on Archives, and he's chaired the Committee on Archival Automation. And he has been now involved for a number of years in the project of digitizing and making available the archives of the genocide courts in Rwanda. He's written a fine article on those archives that you will find online in the publication that the section helped sponsor, edited by Jens Boll, Perrine Canavaggio, and Antonio Gonzalez Quintana, on human rights and archives, free online. And Peter's article in that compilation is very much worth reading. So we're delighted to have him with us, and the floor is yours, Peter.
Okay, thank you, Trudy. Welcome to everybody. I will try now to share my screen. Okay. Okay. I hope you can see the screen. I think so, huh? At least I can. Yeah. Okay. In my presentation, as Trudy said in the introduction, I will I will talk about what they call in Rwanda the Gacaca Archive. I will explain also the strange name. Addressing the let's say the underlying history of what happened, the genocide and the Gacaca courts. I will explain how the courts functioned, explain the archive, and let's say the work that the project is doing on the archive. This is basically how in the past the archive physically was looking like. Piles of boxes with the records of the various courts, and hundreds and even thousands of DVDs, audio files, and whatever kind of technology has been used to record what happened. One thing, at least, that you can see in the boxes where the records are, and they are heavily used. They're still heavily used for juridical purposes. Is that for retrieval, it's not extremely easy. Okay, the boxes are labeled, That means it's a label that says from what court it comes, but not exactly what is in. And there was no catalog at all. So if they needed something, it was just finding first where the courts were, and then picking all the boxes from that courts and trying to collect the records. And of course, if you needed something, it was always in the lowest box, so they had to to put everything out. The archive is is managed by the Ministry of Justice. And the Ministry of Justice is the current client for the project. And that is first of all executed by Aegis Trust. Aegis Trust is an NGO based in England, but they have a branch in Rwanda as well. And that branch in Rwanda, Aegis Trust Rwanda, runs the memorial, on other things, a memorial that that receives thousands and thousands of visitors every year. Recently, even the Prince of Wales and his wife has visited the memorial. It's extremely impressive. Okay, together with Aegis Trust, a consortium has been set up many years ago, including King's College London, the Department of Digital Humanities, originally the University of Southern California, the Shoah Foundation Center for Advanced Genocide Research, and NIOD, the Institute for War, Holocaust and Genocide Studies. It was in around 2012, I think, that they started. So the Shoah Foundation is not anymore in the working group, but the others are still participating, and Aegis Trust is still running the project, doing the project management. A bit about Rwanda and what happened in the 90s. Rwanda is situated in Central Africa, close to the equator, a little bit north. It's a very small country, about the size of the Italian island of Sicily, about 27, 28 square kilometers. But with a population of about 12 million citizens today, and that is 2.5 more than Sicily. So it's very heavily populated. Being located in the Great Lakes region, Rwanda is a lush and hilly country, quite fertile by African standards. In this beautiful country, however, genocide took place in 1994. And over the course of around 100 days, more than 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus were killed by government forces and militia. The Rwanda population basically is composed of Tutsi, that's a minority, and Hutus. Actually, I cannot see the difference. Sometimes I see, okay, that must be a Tutsi. The Tutsi are considered to be rather tall, and the Hutus a little bit less, but I can't see it. And for centuries and centuries, actually, the difference between the two peoples who speak the same language, so there is not this kind of language, this kind of language problem, just live together, where usually the Tutsis were growing cattle and the Hutus were more in agriculture. Often the Tutsis had a more kind of administrative functions. Even the king that existed until the 50s of the last century was a Tutsi. Okay, but it was rather considered to be a kind of given situation, and it worked pretty well. That changed, unfortunately, because of that, let's say, quite a bit of what happened in history. Originally, Rwanda was a German colony. After the First World War, all the German colonies were taken by the by the Allies, and Belgium became it became a protectorate of Belgium because it was close by Congo, so it's rather easy. The German already started a kind of scientific research in trying to find what out what the difference was between Tutsis and Hutus, just by measuring the length and measuring the even the heads, etc. Okay, sort of scientific. Unfortunately, the Belgian took it over and started to also to stamp in the documents, to stamp the T or an H, who was a Tutsi or a Hutu. There's also a third population, but that's extremely small. Because of the historical fact that usually the Tutsis were in a kind of governing position, like the head of a village, even the king, also of a province, they had a sort of administrative roles. They got a priority during the Belgian government. They got a priority in access to education, to universities. So when the country became independent in the 50s, the Hutus were quite a way back in their education, their development, and of course immediately they start to change the system, also with some rights. But the whole fact, and basically created first by the German and then by the Belgian, even not voluntarily, by the fact that the Tutsis over the, let's say, the whole period of colonization and protectorate has been more or less put in a more favorable position. A kind of anger was created among the Hutus. So even in the 50s, in the 60s, quite a bit of violence happened. But the mass started in 1994. Hardliners within the ruling party, because the Hutus being the majority, a huge majority, about between 80 and 90% of the population are Hutus. So after the elections, the Hutus had the huge majority. Okay, and the hardliners within the ruling party and the military took over the power in a political vacuum that was created with the assassination of the country's president, Juvenal Habyarimana. Even up to now, nobody knows who caused the assassination. The plane in which he was returning to Rwanda from a conference about keeping peace, a conference organized by the United Nations. There were also United Nations troops in the country to peacekeepers. His plane was shot down, and it just landed in the garden of the presidential party. Nobody really knows who caused that, who either, let's say, Tutsi rebels or Hutu hardliners, because at least this man tried to keep the peace between the population. So that happened in April 6. Immediately, the violence started, very well organized. So at least that makes a kind of suspicion that there were Hutu hardliners, Hutu militia behind it. The first on target were political rivals and elites and the United Nations peacekeepers. Simultaneously, the extremist Hutu declared war against the entire Tutsi population. It was associated to the Tutsi-dominated guerrilla, the guerrilla forces of the Rwanda Patriotic Front, the RPF. Through effective state bureaucracy, compulsion and selective incentives, Hutu power elements overpowered internal antagonism to the violence, mobilized local officials and civilians, and set in motion a vast extermination operation across the country. Armed with machetes, farming tools, and handmade weapons, mobs of Hutu men roamed their neighborhoods, singling out, abusing, and murdering after 100 days the RPF and murdering. After 100 days, the UN peacekeepers were just taken back because they couldn't do anything. The RPF, the guerrilla forces, succeeded in taking over control over the country and making an end of the slaughtering. These events had a devastating impact on the country. In effect, Rwanda was totally destroyed in 1994. After the genocide, more than 100,000 Hutus were imprisoned by the new government, of course, the Tutsi government. Suspicion of having participated in genocide. Many were just brought in stadiums because, of course, the country didn't have the facilities to imprison, good facilities to imprison 100,000 people. But bringing them to justice through ordinary courts appeared to be a huge challenge, as of the total destruction of the legal system. There's an estimation that more than 3/4 of the judges were murdered. So between 1994 and 1999, only 400 people were tried. To speed up the process of justice, it would likely have taken decades. After a long debate and hesitation, a traditional court system was reintroduced called Gacaca. This system, dating back from the 15th century probably, included the capability to involve the entire community in the process of justice and reconciliation. It is this particular character that makes Gacaca unique in the world, at least in the modern world, as a process of justice and reconciliation. That makes the Gacaca unique in the world as compared to other transitional justice institutions. The announcement of recourse to the Gacaca caused a strong controversy with similar arguments in favor or in disfavor. The supporter of applying traditional Gacaca recommended the emphasis on the role of the population in setting genocide cases. This also stressed the necessity to reconstruct the social fabric. Furthermore, it should be necessary to set up a system of justice in which the population would take part and reveal all the truth about the tragic events, as well as punishing the criminals. Generally, the population was in favor of renovated Gacaca that would work independently from the executive powers. A process of sensitization was carried out in various prisons of the country in order to explain the new approach for faster and efficient settling of genocide cases. In Rilima prison of Kigali, where the sensitization campaign was started, A committee of prisoners, known as Urumuri, was created on the 12th of May 1998 by the prisoners that had pleaded guilty for the crimes they committed. This approach succeeded and many more prisoners confessed as their experience was shared with other prisoners. The results were surprising. In this way, in Kigali Central Prison, testimonies were gathered with tables and descriptions for two communes of Kigali city. Kigali is the capital, and that's divided in 4 communes. They provided list of names of the individuals originated from the 2 communes that had killed, wounded, raped, and the list of property that has been looted or damaged. Gacaca, the word, just means grass. And as you can see, traditionally, but also when the renewed Gacaca courts are tried, it happened in the open air and just on a grass field in the neighborhood where it happened. From 2002 until 2012, so that's even 8 years, because a lot of work has to be done also to convince the international community. But from 2002 until 2012, more than 12,000 Gacaca courts, 12,000 courts in such a small country, were operative in local communities throughout the entire country and concluded almost 2 million cases. The main goals of the Gacaca court system were, first of all, to reveal the truth about the genocide. Second, to speed up the cases of genocide and other crimes against humanity. To elucidate the culture of impunity. To strengthen unity and reconciliation among Rwandans. Because of course, government were very well aware that to rebuild the country and to go along, reconciliation was extremely important. And also, and particularly to towards the international community, to prove that the Rwandans were capable to solve their own problems. Whereas indeed, let's say, the problems before couldn't be resolved by the United Nations. The organization of the Gacaca courts was based on the concept of a cell and a sector. And the Gacaca court was created in each cell and sector. A cell is a very small community that could be even, let's say, a part of a village. A sector is a small group of cells making a village, or, for instance, a part of a town. The total number of cell courts was over 9 million. And at the sector level, 9,000. And on the sector level, 1,500. On the sector level, a part of, let's say, the first stage court was also the court of appeal. Districts and provinces are higher administrative levels, but initially the courts were only established at the higher levels, districts and provinces, but abolished after the pilot phase. So then it only happened on the lower level. In order to support and supervise and coordinate the activities of the Gacaca courts, the National Service of Gacaca Courts was established. the functioning and organization of the Gacaca courts underwent various changing based on the lessons learned from the pilot phases, but let's say basically it remains the same. One of the very special rules and I would say the social concept of the Gacaca courts is no professional judges could be part of the court, and not even official administrators like civil servants. So it was just the population. So that meant that a lot of training has to be done and all the procedures has to be written down very, very carefully. That's one of the reasons why it took a couple of years, because before the courts really could start. Each court, even at the lowest level, was comprised of a general assembly. The general assembly was basically just all the people of the cell. The bench, let's say, that were the judges, and a coordination committee. So the coordination, the organization was separated from making the decisions. The General Assembly of each Gacaca court held an ordinary meeting once a month and an extraordinary session whenever it was required for good functioning of the court. This monthly meeting is aimed at evaluating the activities of the bench and the coordinating committee. And okay, the ideal was that the whole population would participate. And initially it happened, but during the years, of course, the participation became less. Each bench of the Gacaca court was composed of 9 individuals, 9 judges, individuals of integrity. These members of the bench, commonly known as the Inyangamugayo, the judges, were elected by the General Assembly of the cell in which they reside. The election of the judges and other functionaries took place, the first elections, on the in October 2001. Then there was a massive participation of the citizens, in particular women, because many women, even if they survived, was also victims of violence. Gradually, the participation in the work of the courts decreased. Since the judges were not professionals, as I said before, and not even civil servants, an intensive training program was set up to prepare them for the not easy task. Even not all of them were literate. The offenses constituting the crime of genocide were initially classified into 4 categories, modified after the pilot phase into 3. Category 1, the planners, organizers, instigators, supervisors, and ringleaders of the genocide of crimes against humanity. Most of these people has not been tried by the Gacaca courts, but by the International Court in Tanganyika. Category 2, the perpetrators, co-perpetrators, and accomplices of murder or acts of serious violence against others, causing death, individuals who committed other acts of serious violence with the intention to kill, individuals who committed or aided to commit other offenses to individuals without the intention to kill them, together with his or her accomplices. And category 3, those who cause damage to property, just by robbery mostly. For each category, the law, the special Gacaca law, defined the possible sentences, depending of pleading guilty or not. I will come back later to the pleading guilty later. The competences of the cell court, let's say the lowest level, was first to make a list of individuals who resided in the cell before and after the genocide. Even up to now, we don't know exactly how many people has been killed. The estimation is 800,000, but okay, we still hope that by the end the archive will reveal, well, let's say the whole truth, but even that we doubt. So to make a list of individuals who resided in the cell before and after the genocide. It was not something like a civil state available in the country. To make a list of individuals who were suspected of having participated in the genocide, and a list of victims and damaged properties. Bringing together the files forwarded by the public prosecution. To try, let's say the whole, all these lists were submitted to the higher levels, and to see what to do. But at least the cell courts had to try the cases related to properties. Also to receive confessions from individuals who participated in the genocide. And indeed to forward the files who were not in their jurisdiction to the competent courts. And that meant to the sector courts. The sector court making investigations, if necessary, on the testimonies given. Basically based, of course, on the information sent by the cells. To receive confessions from individuals who participated in the genocide. To try cases falling under its jurisdictions, and that is mostly two, but also a number of cases in category 1. After making sure that suspects forwarded to it have been categorized in conformity with the alleged offenses. Examining appeals against judgment passed by the Gacaca courts of the inferior level, let's say from the cells. Examining reports of activities from the lower Gacaca courts of its jurisdiction. So they had also kind of supervision on the cells within their jurisdictions. The procedure was all hearings were public. So in all the pictures that has been made by it, you see indeed people standing, sitting around it, and and eventually also participating, giving testimonies. Then there were two phases, indeed, the information gathering, basically the cell, and the trials, either at the cell or the sector. Information gathering, okay, they had to make lists. Mostly, the courts were provided with forms, pre-printed forms, but not always. And even, let's say, after the genocide, paper was even very, very scarce. Okay, here you see, let's say, a cahier of activities, a kind of record of what happened. But sometimes we see also that they just use little kind of this sort of little booklets that were previously used in schools, just for school children. Or indeed, they just made this kind of list. Later on, much more pre-printed documents were available. So that's the information gathering. The aim of information gathering was to exhaustively present to the cell level at the Gacaca General Assembly all the information collected so far on the preparation and implementation of the genocide in the cell. So what happened in the cell, as to adopt them by consensus. The validation was followed by transcription of all acquired information in registers. And these are now mostly kept, well, partly at the cell level, but also at the, you will find them also at the sector level in registers to serve as a database for the Gacaca courts of the cell and the and eventually also the the sector. The major challenge faced during the validation phase was the tendency of prematurely bringing in debates similar to the hearings, despite of the emphasis made by the coordinating committee to avoid confusing collection of information that is pre-trial phase with the phase hearings. Because sometimes it happened that already during the information people start to say, well, that's not true what happened, etc. Also, of course, it was very often to record that as well, but basically it was something in the during the trial. Drafting the list of individuals accused of having participated in genocide, commonly known as the list of suspects, was made by the Gacaca court of the cell, based on the information validated by the General Assembly of the cell, and consequent allegation of each person. Nationwide, the total number of individuals put in the list of suspects by the end of the data collection phase on the 30th of June 2006 was 818,564 suspects, more than 800,000 suspects. So a lot. Fortunately, that information now, okay, has been during the work on the archive, the previous work already put in sector by sector, put in spreadsheets with a lot of errors, unfortunately. The rules and principles governing the conduct of the trials has been compiled in a booklet known as Trial Procedures in Gacaca Courts. These booklets are available both in English, in French, and in Kinyarwanda. Kinyarwanda is the local language. French was the official administrative language in the country, and that has been replaced now partly by English, because the the behavior of France during the genocide was not extremely correct. Whoever was summoned to appear before the court, whether accused, witness, victim, or any other person, has to be informed in a period of at least 7 days before the trial. The copy of the summons could only be displayed in public places intended for that purpose. A summoned person who refuses to appear is brought by force. Before testifying, the witness had to swear to tell the truth. The public was reminded that refusing to testify, making slanderous denunciations, as well as threatening members of the bench or witnesses is punishable by the law. So that's something that one could expect. The president then reminds the accused of the advantages of the procedures of confession and pleading guilty. A judgment is rendered in public on the day fixed by the court bench. Judgment must be motivated. They are signed or fingerprinted, as you can see here, by all members of the court who seated in the proceedings and participated in the deliberations. Extremely important in the process, in the procedure of pleading guilty, was the fact that confession has to be accepted, because the accused people knew that a confession would mean reducing of the punishment. For instance, instead of 12 years in prison, only 6 years. So the tendency of pleading guilty was, well, quite there. But sometimes they pleaded guilty. Yes, indeed, I wounded that person. And that has to be accepted. And very often witnesses could intervene and say, ho, ho, but you killed also that person, etc. So the confession had to be accepted. The means of appeal were the following: objection, appeal, and review of judgment. Objection could be made against all judgments passed by default by the Gacaca courts. The objection is brought before the court that passed the judgment. The objection was only admissible if the defaulting party pleaded a serious and legitimate reason which impeded him or her for appearing in the trial concern. Except of judgments relating to damage to property passed by the Gacaca Court of Cells, all cases are subject to appeal. The Gacaca Court of the Sector deals with appeals against judgments rendering by the Gacaca Courts of the Cell of its jurisdiction. Judgments passed by the Gacaca Court of the Sector at first instance are appealed against the Gacaca Court of Appeal in the same jurisdiction. In specific cases, the judgment could be subject to review. The Gacaca Court of Appeal is the only competent court to review judgments passed under such conditions. The records were created within a process and a community that both basically were oral, and neither the people who created and primarily used records were professional administrators, nor has current archive staff and an archival formation, because, as I said, the archive is now kept by the Ministry of Justice. But the staff there doesn't have an archival education. In order to support the process of information gathering and hearings, equipment comprising a large amount of booklets and samples of forms to be filled in, notebooks, registers, pens, and foot rulers were distributed. Instructions were given what records should be created and what kind of information they should contain. Therefore, the case files have a structured character, and with sufficient knowledge of the juridical and administrative procedure can be checked on completeness. The data registered during the information gathering phase at the cell level has been collected, validated, and copied into registers at the sector level. So you see there is indeed this kind of help. Each court created and kept its own archive. When the Gacaca courts were closed down in 2012, the records had to be sent to Kigali, where they were stored in the compound of the National Police and court by court boxed separately. That means that the Gacaca Archive, with a capital A, contains over 12,000 archival fonts, varying from one box for a very small cell court to about 15 boxes for the biggest sector courts and courts of appeal. Not all secretaries were good in record keeping, and transport didn't do good to the archives as well. As a result, the arrangement of the fonts is often very poor. At best, the case files are kept more or less together in a kind of folder, but very often, and that's in the major cases, the documents are completely dispersed. You see, that's one of the best protected archives in the world. It's extremely difficult to get in. The main task initially of the Gacaca Archive project referred at the beginning of this paper was to develop practical strategies for preservation and making the archive accessible. First of all, for the staff, for the archive staff under the Ministry of Justice, that yearly has to respond to over 4,000 requests for files, mostly from prisoners or their lawyers, but also from courts of justice dealing with appeals, let's say courts of justice in the current juridical system, but also from immigration officers of foreign countries dealing with requests for residence permits by Rwandan citizens. So as you can see, this even physically, it is extremely difficult to retrieve the records. Okay. They had a kind of list where the boxes were, but then very often they had to open all the boxes. Absolutely, even in those archives of cells or sectors that were rather well organized, there was no list available of where the case files were. The only thing they had is indeed they worked on was this spreadsheets of list of tried persons, accused and tried persons, but that was all. So at least they knew in what archive they had to, what fonts they had to search, but then they had to find all the boxes. And then indeed the staff was not very well trained, absolutely underpaid, not very well managed. So they all had a computer, but walking around very often they were just doing things on the internet and not really working on on making available the archive. So it started with a feasibility study, a kind of pre-proposal. Then a project plan was presented in December 2014, and the first phase started on 2015. By then, still thinking that the resources were available and that time was available. So at least one thing that happened, that you can see here. Staff is now putting boxes in shelves. To obtain the main goals, short-term access for fast retrieval of the physical files, and in the long term opening the archive for opening the archive also for the wider public, different strategies are needed. The traditional one in archival practice is to bring dispersed documents to the proper file and describe them as minimal as possible. A unique number and the name of the perpetrator, and in the case of Rwanda, also the parents for identification, because of the very strange kind of name giving that they still had, was considered for the Gacaca archive to be sufficient. Leaving out of consideration the mandatory of descriptive element that is compliant with ICA and thus and it does not hinder future expansion. The short-term priorities on case files leave other parts of the archive more or less abandoned. This was the approach on which the archive staff has been trained. After the training course, indeed, you see how we just set up a training course working with real documents. I did it with a colleague of the NIOD, and we had a kind of, it was the 2 weeks of training, 5 days a week. And of course, we had the objectives of the training, let's say learning objectives, but also a kind of hidden objective that they should have done at least 15 linear meters. By the end, they had done 5 linear meters. So my colleague said, okay, we are failing our objectives. I said, no, we have at least our learning objectives, because the training, initially, I start to train. The level of English is rather poor. Unfortunately, there was a kind of team leader who spoke very well English, who has authority over them, was very smart. So finally, he took over the teaching. He grabbed it very quickly, and he took over the teaching. So kind of training the trainer. But then it also happened that it was not just training, a long discussion. One simple example, let's say during training, the stacks, arrived, the shelves. That was a gift by the National Archives of the Netherlands. Let's say just second half, they replaced the fixed a part of the fixed stacks from movable, and it was exactly 6 kilometers of stacks that were shelves that were transmitted. So of course we started to discuss how to put it on and how to number the shelves. So they invented something that for me was rather queer. So okay, they had it, and I said, well, okay, if you feel like, but that is not something, let's say, a common practice. Again, a discussion of at least 2 hours. 2 hours happened. But okay, by the end, they had their system based on common practice, I must say. But by the end of the training course, it became apparent, with the given resources that they had, the other task of the archive staff, the motivation, their working habit, that it would likely take more or less 15 or 20 years before the whole record would be described in a minimal phase. It was even a course in boxing. I see that some of the okay. Oh, I'm very sorry. I made it. Okay. I made a mistake. Okay. Okay. After this conclusion, actually, it was right. After this conclusion, the need for alternative strategy became urgent. When after the first stage of the project, the Rwandan government decided not to wait for the physical arrangement of the archive, but to give priority of immediate digitization. From the perspective of preservation, this decision made sense given by the far optimal storage condition of the archive. Even if the Rwandan climate is not too bad, but let's say air conditioning, okay, there was a kind of air conditioning, but not functioning very, very well. From a perspective of the then state of the art experience of improving access, the decision was at least controversial. Even more, since the ministry wanted to have the work done within 1 year. It challenged 6 linear kilometers of single documents. A challenge that even in countries with a long experience in archival digitation would have been almost a mission impossible. The 3 remaining partners of the consortium decided to take the challenge. With support of an English digitization expert, procedures and clear instructions were written, equipment was procured, and a small German firm developed the workflow software. The ministry hired temporary staff that in shifts worked 7 days a week and 24 hours a day. The procedure was based on 4 main activities: document preparation control, scanning, and quality control. The staff was trained, a pilot carried out, the procedure reviewed, the software modified, and then the real work started. 1 year was too short a time, but scanning 6 linear kilometers, millions and millions of documents and registers within 14 months has been an impressive operation. See here, scanning. Also, this man, okay, I did a review on the digitization process halfway, and so I followed all the procedures, and they brought me to this scanning operator, extremely bright one, because they have kind of bundles just that would fit in the scanner. These scanners were excellent scanners, also for the various kinds of documents, also the quality, the size of documents, absolutely excellent. This man made always smaller bundles. When I asked him why, he said, well, listen, every now and then it happens that an error occurs. If I make a small bundle, it is easier to restore it than when I make a bundle of 10 centimeters. It's also, let's say practice. The digitized archive is by far not better accessible than the paper one, and likely even less, since the scanning took place in the same disorder as that of the originals. Okay, all the documents, at least let's say a document that consists in more than one page, they were restored, and the first page got a barcode giving, let's say, the code of the court, the box, and the bundle within that box. But still the disorder is there. Let's say the files were not absolutely not, the case files not restored. So an alternative methodology of adding essential metadata was sought, making use of the facts that almost all documents are pre-printed forms, according to a well-established and defined document types, and that the names of the accused persons were already available, organized by court. The few metadata that during the scanning automatically was captured included a part of meaningless document ID, the information about the court that produced the document, and the bundle of the box in it. So the methodology for assigning metadata, essential access, was added as a plugin in the workflow software, just recognizing the document form. So there were 28 different document types, was recognized, immediately highlighted the name of the accused person, and then from the database organized by the cell or by the sector court, just by court, and that's not an enormous list, they could just link the document to that person, and that's going on to the next document. Unfortunately, the staff decided, or the government decided, also to include the name of the victims, so that that makes the whole procedure even less less quick. But still, it is an I would say, for this kind of archive, a much faster system than the original one. Some reflection. First of all, what stories tells the archive? Well, actually, it doesn't tell the story of the genocide. It tells the story of what happened in the courts. And okay, through that window, it tells also something of the genocide, but never the whole story. So indeed, ICA's trust is also collecting and by oral memory processes, collecting other witnesses outside the court. A second reflection is about the impartiality of the archive staff. Can be questioned. Let's say the people of ICA's trust, okay, they don't work with the archive, but they deal with the project. They don't touch the archive. But the people in the archive staff, we don't know. Okay, it is true, if you leave the archive, the guards are always checking your bag if you didn't take out something else. But what happens within, I don't know. But hopefully not. But indeed, about the integrity of the archive, well, maybe the disorder helps also to protect it in a way. So indeed, they are reading documents. Sometimes they have the tendency also to read too much. I never read one document because I don't understand one word of it. It's a very strange. So indeed, one of the reflections is about the visibility of what is happening, because still now it will take years and years, and convincing them of, let's say, making a priority. First of all, connecting them to the accused persons so that you have the victims, and not going into the contents. You have at least accused persons and you have the case files, and not already making more metadata. It was just talking from to that man's ears, unfortunately. Also because, let's say, the professionals, I consider myself to be a professional in the project, has to talk never directly to the ministry, but always through Aegis Trust. And actually, Aegis Trust, who runs the project, they have the interest of taking the project, let's say, for more than 1 year, because they make some money from it. So indeed, this is part of how it was still stored, and that is absolutely improved. But still, okay, here we see names of victims that are buried there, but it's still a part. A lot of progress has been made, I must say. At least, let's say, physically, the archive is let's say, rather well underway. The digitizing helps in one way, indeed, to make accessible the archive. Absolutely. It helps also, and that's a second kind of hidden goal, to give Rwanda a place in, let's say, in the development of technology in Central Africa. Rwanda doesn't have huge resources, mineral resources, so they put quite a bit in technology. But let's say, from a Western point of view, it is okay, not always reasonable. But we have to take in consideration, first of all, what the project manager once said to me. Okay, you're right, but in Rwanda we do it differently. Okay. And the second is, it's their archive. It is their memory. It is part of their history, a very painful history. And it's something that they want to make accessible also for, it's also accessible under restrictions for researchers. So they want to make it accessible. And first of all, they want to protect it. And likely the fact that it has been digitized protects it, at least if it happens that it comes a new government that wants to destroy the archive. It's easier to defend the digital archive than a physical archive. Okay, that is what I at least wanted to say. And a stop share. Oh, I'm over time. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, Peter. We all learned a lot, I'm sure. Let me open this part. We have another 20 minutes or so by asking you two questions. One is there a security copy of the digital material outside the country? You don't have to tell us where. And second, we saw images of videos, and you mentioned briefly videos, and I didn't understand what those were and how they fit into this scheme.
Okay, the first question, there at least the project manager, when I did a review, I had a lot of compliments. The quality of the digitizing, the organization of the work, and a lot of compliments for his English colleague as well, who did a wonderful job, absolutely. But I had then two comments. The first was my comment, just practically, given the high quality of the digitizing and extremely low number of documents that were just skipped by error, extremely low, I said it's better just to abolish the that part of the quality and replace that by working already on metadata. Okay, they wanted to continue as that. And again, it's their project. My second, and that was very heavy, there was no backup. That was a matter of money. He assured me that there is now a backup, but I'm afraid that under this government, the backup is still in Rwanda. They didn't want, that was one of the reasons why the SAHR archive in the United States stepped out. They wanted to have, let's say, a copy of all the documents, and they didn't get it. So I'm afraid it's still there, but it could be very well the case that that is already in another country. I don't know. And maybe it is there, but even the project manager doesn't know. So, but I'm afraid still not. But anyhow, as soon as they may think, it's at least at a different place. As soon as they think that there is a risk, it's not that difficult to smuggle out a digital archive. Even it's by far too huge to do it by WeTransfer or something else. So it should just be done physically by taping it. Your second question, the really thousands, it's almost, I think, 8,000 of DVDs. And I once made also calculation of the disk size that it would need. It are basically records of the courts, just of what happened, of the trials, of what happened there. So extremely interesting material. Also because it's a lot, and it would require to save that archive. It would require a lot of resources that are still not available. At least the people are aware of it. Also aware, we discussed that closely. They have already, let's say, the possibility of saving it. We discussed also the risk, because there are even dead tapes, whatever audio or audio visual kind of technology has been there in the past, you would find it. But for the bigger part, it's DVD. But it's a lot, and it's really terabytes and terabytes and terabytes. I think it's really worth to saving it, and up to now, let's say the resources are now basically divided by the Dutch government. That's, let's say, also the way I was involved, or NIOD was involved, and I'm formally still working for NIOD in Amsterdam. Let's say the resources come now for all the development from the Dutch government, the Dutch embassy in Kigali, and all the operational costs, let's say all the staff that did the digitizing, all the archive staff, that is paid for by the Rwandan government. But also the storage is paid for by Rwandan government. And the idea is, okay, if they find it so important, they have to make available the resources that is needed, at least for the minimal standard. So I hope, as soon as the project, they are now in the last stage. Unfortunately, over the last 2 years, basically nothing happened because of a serious lockdown in Rwanda. Also, let's say the health system is not the best in the world. So to avoid really all the, let's say, avoiding an enormous amount of people killed, Rwanda went almost in a complete lockdown. So that meant that the work on the archive was on a very low level.
Peter, who took the videos, and what kind of quality are they? Do you know?
They are on, I have seen some of them. They're on high quality, absolutely high quality. At least the samples that, and it's just samples that I took out and put in my computer. They are on high quality.
Who took them?
Yep. So we hope to find the money, let's say, as soon as this project, let's say the testing also of the metadata, that becomes a running business, to find the money to convince Dutch government also to start working on the audiovisual archive.
Yeah, and so it was a court reporter of some sort who took the videos?
Likely, actually, I don't know. I don't know how he did, but I think it has just been one of the General Assembly who did it. I don't know if all the courts has been recorded, but I don't think so. But it's about 8,000. That's quite a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
But it can be the case that that's only a number of samples. But even then.
Yeah. Tom Adami's got his hand up. Tom, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, thank you, Trudy, and thank you, Peter. It's always very remotivating to hear somebody talk about a subject that's very dear to my heart. And a couple of my colleagues have joined me today to listen to this. We are from the successor organization to the Rwandan Tribunal, which is the international criminal justice response to what happened in genocide. Yeah. So yeah, it's very reassuring to hear somebody talk about this. Just quickly on the DVD issue, back in August 2014, I had the pleasure of seeing the Gacaca Archive at the Central Police Headquarters in Kigali, and I was told that the 8,000 DVDs were produced by an American NGO that did it pro bono, and that they provided the DVD in that format because, well, there was no discussion about how the final product would be presented. So it was provided to the Gacaca authorities on DVD. But as you said, they were very high quality, and I believe they were stored in the main repository, which was air conditioned at the time back in 2014. But I don't know the shelf life of a DVD if it's not transferred, migrated, and yeah. So that was 2014, and they had just been set up in a nice wooden glass shelf. Yeah. But
I suppose then the American NGO, indeed, I remember it now, but because there were also people, let's say, from the international community to look at during the Gacaca courts, let's say, at least to see as if the procedure was followed correctly, because there were, of course, there were also on the international level, quite a bit of doubts about it. But I suppose that American NGO has a copy of the DVDs as well.
I'm not sure about the agreement that they came to, but I because it was a pro bono type of work, I don't know if the Rwandan authorities had any say on who had copies or
Mm.
whether the originals were to be deposited in Rwanda. So yeah, those details I'm not sure,
Okay.
but I'm
No.
sure somebody within the project would be able to tell you the genesis of where they came from. Yeah. Also, during that visit, we took a special interest in the AV collection that we saw, because we felt at the time this is one side project that we, as an international organization that had vast experience in digitizing AV material, we could provide some sort of assistance to them without getting into too much detail and without raising the specter of, you know, politics and how the UN should be part of this working group that you mentioned, Peter, and is not and could be. You know, the politics is very, very, very tricky to negotiate. We made an offer in 2014 that we could provide, if not actually the digitization of the DVDs into some sort of preservation format, at least maybe consider giving them the hardware to do it themselves. The offer was kindly acknowledged by the Ministry of Justice and other authorities, and then nothing happened. I don't want to say that the offer's still on the table because it's not my decision to make, but that was one thing that we put out there back in 2014. And the other thing I just wanted to comment on was that early on in your talk, you said that the purpose of the Gacaca system was to reveal the truth about the genocide. And then I was very heartened to listen to you say later on, I think it was slide 32, where you said that the archive can only ever provide a slice of the truth. And that's exactly what I tell people about the archive that I manage at the mechanism. It is a history of the judicial process that came out of the genocide. It can never be considered the truth of the genocide. So yeah, just a little point there. And also a question, are there any security classifications within this system? Are records all deemed to be public eventually, or is there a subset of closed records as well?
Oh no. Let's say up to now, all the permission has to be given by the ministry. Actually, it changed a little bit initially when you were there, and even to last year, between the Ministry of Justice and the archive, there was the Commission for Fighting Against the Genocide.
Yeah.
That commission has been abolished now. So it's now directly under the Ministry of Justice. And that could be an advantage as well. But as of the access, I wrote a proposal. Let's say this one of the tasks that I had to do is writing a proposal on, let's say, the access policy. As far as I know, that proposal has still not really been approved or discussed, but absolutely up to now, it will not be very easily available in a digital format. I have seen researchers that are working on it. Surprisingly, even a Japanese student was sitting there who learned herself Kinyarwanda. But of course, it's under heavy restrictions. So one of the things that already has to be done when they will make it available is, for instance, anonymizing personal names will absolutely happen. One of the things I'm working on now is, let's say, my task is officially to write a research guide. Of course, they thought of a kind of book, either printed or a PDF. They won't get from me a book. And indeed already, let's say the framework is done. It will be a website, an interactive website where people can learn a lot about the genocide, a lot about the procedures or the structure of the archive. If they don't know, they can learn a lot about the document types. But those who are experienced can also go directly into the records. If they don't understand something. From there, I can, for instance, go back to the procedure or to the document form. A part of that research guide will be a section on education, where we put already, let's say, some kind of examples of the different trials of the procedures, and of course with anonymized forms, so that also already, let's say, researchers can see a first step of what happened, can read the documents, as long as they understand the language. They can read the documents and at least already do something directly. As of the names, at least, but that's not something only in Rwanda, that would be in every country. The history is still too recent to make public all the names. Probably it could be made available, for instance, for immigration services, so that they don't have to travel to Rwanda or to ask for photocopies that they likely won't get. They don't have to travel to Rwanda, but they can get access under certain restrictions to the records itself. But again, it will not be available for the wider public, and that's understandable.
Yeah.
Thanks, thank you, Peter. Let's see if anyone else has questions or comments. We have about 4 minutes left. Don't see any other raised hands. Let me take this moment to say that the next First Tuesday talk, which will be in October, will be Ruth Borja from Peru, talking about the records of the Peruvian Truth Commission. It will be in Spanish. At the moment, we don't have the option of providing simultaneous translation. It will be recorded, as this one has been, and it will appear on the ICA's website following the program. I also want to thank Perrine Canavaggio, who arranges all these First Tuesday talks for us, and Kate Blaylock, who provides the background and the letting you in function for all of this as well. So with that, Peter, any last thoughts you'd like to say?
No, I've nothing to say anymore. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Peter. We all learned a lot. Thank you to all of you who joined us from around the world, and see you in October. Goodbye.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.